a production of the Mesa Chamber of Commerce. Visit us at mesachamber.org.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. My name is Bob Nelson. I am the Director of Communications for the Mesa Chamber of Commerce. And today we have with us a couple of very exciting guests, and they're going to share with us some information about an important survey that they have recently published. So let's get right to it. Joining us today is the CEO of Southwest Business Credit Services, Mr. Rich Adams, and a managing partner for Udall Shumway, Mr. Steve West. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today.
Welcome, Bob. Glad to be here.
Good to be with you, Bob.
So let me just go ahead and open it up real quick, Rich. If you just want to give us a bit of an elevator speech about Southwest Business Credit Services.
Well, thank you, Bob. We are a full-service business-to-business credit reporting agency. We provide business credit information. We also provide what we call industry credit groups, which are real-time forums for the exchange of business-to-business credit information. Trade credit or business credit is probably one of the most important engines of the economy. Our clients primarily are in construction, agrichem, print and advertising, media, and wholesale foods. And trust me, those industries don't go very far or very fast without supplier credit to the end user. And that's who we serve. We also provide professional education, an annual conference on construction and commercial credit. And we've been actually in operation in Arizona since 1927. I'm a proud member of the Mesa Chamber of Commerce.
Indeed you are. And Steve, tell us a little bit about Udall Shumway.
Thanks, Bob. We're a group of hardworking attorneys trying to help Arizona consumers and businesses meet their goals. And we've been around since 1965, founded by Mesa attorney David Udall and Tempe attorney Dale Shumway. And we've been going strong ever since. We look forward to a bright future for Arizona.
Excellent. So let's kind of start with a real quick high overview of this survey. It is kind of what the participants of the survey are looking forward to in the future. But you guys started this according to some conversation I had with Rich maybe about 3 years ago. Is that right, Rich?
Yes, that's right. This is the third year we've conducted the survey in conjunction with Udall Shumway. One of the partners there, an attorney, Jim Reed, who's a great friend of many of our clients, loves to provide education to our clients when needed. He's been a frequent speaker at our conferences and seminars. This was actually Jim's idea. I believe it carried forward from something he had done at another firm several years ago with fair success. And he proposed it to me a little over 3 years ago that we rekindle this thing, because having joined Udall Shumway, Jim really fell in love with the East Valley. And he thought that, as Steve mentioned earlier, this type of a service could be really beneficial to businesses, particularly small businesses operating in the East Valley. So we launched it. And the first year, I think somewhere around 100 responses. Last year, we may have broken 300 last year or got real close to it. And this year is an easy number for me to remember, 327. I was a real fan of the old small block Chevy 327 when I was a kid. So I remember that number real easy. Steve, what would you like to add?
Now that's I think that sums it up well, Rich. After we heard Jim's idea, we just felt like it was an idea whose time had come, especially for the East Valley, where so much is happening, but really for all of Arizona. There's so much happening all over the state and within the Phoenix metro area. And getting a good grasp on the feelings, the thoughts of our business leaders, we felt would be very beneficial to all of us. We could get a good sense of where things are now, what's anticipated, and what recommendations business leaders have, and then we can communicate that to policymakers and help maybe be part of the discussion going forward.
So let's before we dig into the details of the results, let's go ahead and let people know how they can get a hold of this. So Steve, do you have them there at Udall Shumway? Can people download them? How can people get a copy?
Yes, we can, we can, if you want to email us here at Udall Shumway, you can email me or Jim Reed. My email address is slw@udallshumway.com.
So popular was it that we printed 300 initial copies, and we did a reprint. We ran out, and I have a limited number of hard copies that I would say would be available on a first come, first request basis, and we also have this in electronic form. Bob, I think you're going to post our various contact information at the end. The other thing I'd like to add is 3 very important partners in the collection of this information, in addition to the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, which we thank you for. Visit Mesa, our local Convention and Visitors Bureau, Visit Mesa, and Phoenix East Valley Partnership. John Lewis and his group were kind enough to distribute this survey to their respective memberships. So we really thank them.
Cool. So let's talk first about how you organized the data that you've collected. So it looks like you've got different sections. The first section is kind of asking the participant to talk about what their expectations are for 2022. So Rich, if you kind of want to just touch a little bit on some of maybe the philosophy behind some of the questions that are there, and maybe share some of the surprising results that you got, and maybe some of the, oh yeah, that was totally expected results.
Sure. Well, these questions were initially in broad form developed by Jim Reed and myself 3 years ago. And it was in the similar format. Now let's talk about, or let's let the respondent talk first about their company. Then we ask them to comment about their views and anticipations of the Arizona economy. And the new one, and that's pretty much what it was limited to, then the new one is recommendations for improvement, which we hope policymakers and elected officials might pay a little bit of attention to. It's a voice of the business community. So last year's survey we felt was heavy in questions relative to COVID and the pandemic, and the way that was affecting businesses. We felt that it was time to move beyond that, because our feeling was in the fall when we put these together that we were starting to emerge from that. Hopefully, as we move into 2022, we continue to emerge and it becomes less of a focus. So I think our intention was to raise the focus of the respondents to look forward. So that's a little bit of the genesis on the questions. I think I would characterize this first section as overall very optimistic. As I read through the responses, for example, in 2022 compared to 21, do you anticipate net revenues for your company will increase, decrease, or remain the same? A full 85% anticipate revenues to increase. Purchasing new equipment, making investments, capital improvements, a full 70% plan to do things of this nature as we move into 2022. With that said, there's also an anticipation that inflation will continue to increase. However, I tend to wonder if these questions, particularly the question about inflation, were asked today as opposed to in late fall, whether an even larger portion would suspect that inflation will become a greater challenge as we move forward. Maybe I'll stop there and see if Steve has any perspectives on these.
I think my perspective is this reflects a lot of what we're hearing in the news media and elsewhere about recovery. That there's this engine revving, and ready to move forward. And some of these responses reflect that. But of course, then we've had some recent jolts. The unexpected increases, they weren't totally unexpected, but maybe larger increases in inflation than the Fed and others were expecting. And then, of course, the situation with Russia and Ukraine. But in general, I think this reflects optimism for our local economy, and it also presents some conundrums. They're anticipating that employment will increase, but then, of course, we have questions later that indicate that we may not have enough employees to fill all the jobs. So it is consistent with what we've been hearing nationally, with a few little changes.
So that kind of leads into one of the interesting things prior to starting this session that Rich and I talked about, was that there were some points where questions were asked and respondents kind of leaned one way, and then based on a later question, the respondents kind of leaned against that way. Talk a little bit about that. Why do you think that trend happened, and what do you think it means?
Well,
I'll throw that open. So,
well, here's one example that I would point to. We talk about, do you anticipate that bank lending levels and credit lines for Arizona businesses will increase, decrease, or remain the same? And we're evenly split, a third, and a third. Yet if we fall back a few questions, do you anticipate an increase or decrease in sales of goods or services supplied by your company on credit? And a full 75% anticipate an increase. So while they anticipate their accounts receivable sales to increase by 7 out of 10, they're not anticipating that levels of credit extended will increase. So I don't know whether that is based on how the question was phrased, but it's a bit inconsistent to me that you would expect those credit terms sales to increase by that much, yet you're split a third, and a third on whether overall lending will increase. We talk about debt levels. 50% anticipated an increase in their company's customer account debt levels, yet sales are increasing by 75%. So I don't know, you could read a lot into that, and these were high level questions. It could just simply be that they anticipate 25% of that will be cash. So there are some things that cause you to look a little deeper into the question. And from my perspective, those are questions that get fine-tuned a little bit more, or a follow-up question is asked when we do this again.
okay. So let me, before I kind of drive into section 2, let me ask real quick, if I own a restaurant in downtown Mesa and I hear about this survey and I download a copy of the survey and I'm looking at this survey, what information as almost a micro business owner am I looking at that I can act on in my business over the next 6 months to a year?
Well, I think you can glean a few things from it. I think you can glean that the general consensus is that business is good and getting better. So you might feel better about making some hiring decisions. You might feel better about ordering that new commercial refrigerator that you've been considering buying. You might consider going to the bank and asking for additional capital to expand your business. I think the other thing that you can glean from it is that while things look good and we feel pretty good about putting the help wanted sign out, we may have a hard time finding somebody. So I think those are some initial things you could gather.
Steve?
Well, I think this is obviously a high-level survey, and if I'm a new business owner looking at this, I can see trends, but I can also say I need to ask more questions. So, for example, do you anticipate an increase or decrease in the number of companies competing locally? 54% said no change, but there were another 35 or 36% that said we expect an increase. And if I'm an owner of a new business, I'd want to know, well, which businesses are we talking about? Obviously, we'd have to drill down into the information, get a little more data about that. But, and then, do you anticipate that employment hiring at your company will increase? that would tell me that 70% are anticipating increased hiring, which tells me that there's going to be competition in the employment market. Again, what industries are we talking about? But at least it gives you a general trend of what a lot of leaders in the East Valley and primarily, but some in Phoenix, what they're thinking.
You know, Bob, it's just a rumor, but I've been told that it may be part of the reason that our good mayor announced that it's always cool in Mesa about a week ago is that he may have read this report.
Nice. So let me transition here into section 2. So section 2 talks about the Arizona's economy in a larger sense. The very first question I think sets a very important tone for that, which is their optimism for how we're doing. And, you know, obviously there's 75% of the respondents in that question said that they're expecting Arizona's economy to increase. But there's not an insignificant number of respondents that kind of think maybe we might decrease a little bit. Any thoughts on who those, like what industries those people might be in?
You know, I think it points to something Steve mentioned just a few moments ago, is that we could probably do a better job in future surveys of learning more about the industry sectors that respondents are answering these questions from. I would suspect, and this is just what I have gathered in talking to a number of our business clients, it may be industries where hiring needs cannot be met. It may be industries where supply chain issues are hitting the hardest. I think those are the two that I would suspect. And you know, it's interesting on this question. I was on a call with CEOs of similar organizations to mine from different parts of the country, and some of the folks on the East Coast indicated that some of their clients are starting to see cash flow in the construction industry and related industries start to slow. And we haven't seen that here. So I don't know whether that's a regional issue, could be weather related, I don't know. But that is one of the types of things that our organization listens for and passes on to our clients. And we also look for those trends to emerge here. So those are my two best guesses, Bob, about that 15% that responded that way.
Okay. And I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on that very next question that talks about anticipated lending levels and credit lines. That question got split a third, and a third. And typically that usually means there's not a lot of consensus in regards to what's happening out there with that. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I can speak a bit more well-informed in terms of a local community bank, Gateway Bank here in Mesa, that I am a member of its board of directors. This is not what Gateway is seeing. As a local community bank, Gateway enjoys a very healthy stream of new business applications and opportunities. So I don't know, and that's from the bank side. So this would not be an accurate view of what's happening in that local community bank. When a group of over 300 answers like this, I think you could read a lot of different things into it. It could just be that there were adequate lines of credit with reserves. It could be that cash flow is sufficient to finance their growth opportunities and aspirations. I'm not so sure about the ones that are talking about decreases. So that's definitely a question that it would be interesting to know the industry sectors of the respondents, and particularly, why would you feel that this type of activity would decrease?
Steve, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm with Rich and you. I think we're all a little puzzled by that, the responses there. One would think that in an exciting economy like Arizona's, that the business owners might be a little more optimistic about the banks lending more. But I'm with you. I think we'd have to drill down and actually talk to some of the specific respondents about those who said you think that bank lending levels or credit lines will decrease. That may be a micro rather than a macro answer. Individual businesses that may have anticipated their own levels dropping. So it's really hard to say.
Yeah, no, okay. So Steve, let me carry you through to a different question on the survey. There's a question about people's opinions on large corporations that are moving into the area. So Facebook, Google, Apple, all of those guys moving into the area. The question basically wasn't so much if that's going to continue, but if that has a positive or a negative impact on the state. And it seemed like at 90%, that's a pretty overwhelming response that is positive behavior. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on what you suspect people are seeing in that.
Well, it would be an intuitive response, really. I don't have any data to support it, but I mean, we are a growing economy. We are welcoming new businesses, and those new businesses are bringing in with jobs and they consumers and housing, and so in general, the impact of all of this on other businesses who are already here would be very favorable. We would anticipate more sales, more progress from the work that these big companies are bringing in. Having said that, I'm not sure everybody has thought through what kind of impact are these companies going to have on our ability to provide water, and on what impact will they have on infrastructure. And we tend to look at the exciting part first, and then, oh yeah, I forgot about that later. But I think this is maybe just a response that most of us would have. We're very excited to see new businesses come in, and we'll take care of the other things as they come at us. I think we're doing a better job now as a state and as a local economy of trying to anticipate some of the negative effects, trying to build those kinds of things in than we did 20 years ago. But it's still, I'm not sure everybody's thought all of the potential negative effects completely through yet.
So it's interesting that you point that out, because that question does actually come up in the survey later on. And there is a fairly strong sentiment at about 75% that thinks that lack of access to significant water supplies will impact revenues. Rich, what do you kind of glean from that?
Well, I think taking the two questions together, I think one of the reasons we see such an overwhelmingly positive response to the question of business relocation is if you're a restaurant, if you are a construction company or a material supplier, or you're a car dealer, you're happy to see all these businesses coming in. And if you're a residential realtor, you're really happy, or on the commercial side. So I think a lot of that 90% positive is driven by immediate positive fallout from these businesses relocating. Example, TSMC, I counted 17 cranes in the air at that construction site when last I drove out that way. So a lot of people are working, a lot of people are providing concrete and materials and other building materials out there. So they're real happy about it, and they're part of that 90%. Then you jump over to that water question. I think, in a personal opinion, and gathered from talking to people in my client base, I think the water issue is a critical issue that's not going to go away. And I jump back pre-COVID to maybe 3 to 4 years ago. You may remember Governor Ducey held a press conference, and he invited in former governor and former Secretary of the Interior, Bruce Babbitt, who talked about the water compact that had been renegotiated, And at that time, I was curious enough to go back and replay it. At that time, the announcement was, we've done great work here and a lot of our problems are solved. Well, in the meantime, Lake Mead continues to drop, and farmers in the Central Valley here on Casa Grande are still crying for water, and it's not just limited to that. So I think water is going to be a huge problem and a huge challenge, but then let's come back to Facebook, which if I correctly read the material and paid attention to the Mesa Office of Economic Development's presentation, that is a water, it is a zero net use facility. So I think there are ways that these problems are being addressed, but I think the real challenge is the more residential units, the more water use. And assuming we can get them built, where does that water come from? So I think it's a real challenge for our leadership.
Excellent. So let's transition a little bit into a couple of areas that are obviously buzzwords right now. The first of which being transportation. The survey does a pretty decent job of pulling out some data in regards to people's feelings on transportation, both where we are currently with transportation and then kind of if we're going to be able to meet those needs. Steve, do you want to kind of just touch a little bit on that piece and see what, if there's any trend to glean out of those results?
Yeah, I think it's probably reflective to some extent, and it reflects the mood of the country about, in general, about infrastructure. We saw the bipartisan approach to infrastructure in Congress. We've seen the passage of a bill that is hopefully sending immense funds to the states to help improve infrastructure. And I think the question about our roads and bridges and railways and other infrastructure reflects just in general our feeling that we need to focus on those things more, both as a country and as a state. So hopefully that's the challenge, and maybe some of the good news is that help is on the way. But I think that there is more to be done, and I think this sends a clear signal to our legislators. While there are things of importance, this is a very, very important thing to our business community and ultimately to our consumers, to our population in general. And then I think the question about mass transit is also interesting, that often business leaders are maybe lean a little more conservative, and you see maybe to some extent an antipathy towards mass transit. But I think over time, I think we've all been educated and we've seen the benefits of mass transit, how it can help our communities. And I think this answer is instructive. Over 50% feel that it's not enough, that we need to do more to facilitate movement around our community. So again, this may just be drilling down a little bit more into some of the data, but in general, I think it reflects a desire on the part of the business community to improve our infrastructure and also improve our access to mass transit.
Cool. And Rich, I'm going to shoehorn in before I have you guys, because I know the survey itself didn't necessarily ask a specific question about housing, but I'm going to shoehorn in with something real quick, and that's education, because there are some pretty poignant questions asked in the survey surrounding education. And if you would, Rich, tell us a little bit about what you think those results are telling everybody about the state of education here.
Well, if there was a question here that really didn't surprise me, these didn't surprise me because I've been fortunate to served on Mesa's Economic Development Advisory Board for a number of years, and it has been a constant concern and a constant focus. Workforce development, education and training, and this question, the last question that talks about, do you believe Arizona's K through 12 community colleges and universities produce an adequate workforce. Clearly, a bit over half of the respondents still don't think so. And I think part of that is we continue to see new technological businesses, TSMC, Facebook, Google. They're looking for folks that have some basis in this type of formal education. And what they're telling us here is they don't think we're doing it half the time. Here, probably a better answer than I thought we would get. 42% feel that the workforce exists that is qualified for these jobs, but it's pretty evenly split. So I think education, I think workforce development remains a very important issue, as it always has been. I think we've gained some ground, not as much as I would like. And just to circle back real quickly to Steve's comments on transportation, I think we are so fortunate to have had leaders with the vision. Jack Sellers comes to mind on transportation. Had we not started building the freeways when we did, I think part of this 74.4% that said no, not make the drive every day out of Santan Valley or Queen Creek to parts west. So
They're all on Ellsworth Road, apparently.
that's right. But so I think education and workforce development remain just greatly important to our economy remaining strong. How to have the workforce.
Let me kind of let you close out with one last question, and this is going to be very much what your thoughts are, because I didn't see a specific survey question related to housing, but I do want to kind of see if there's data that you can pull out of here that gives you any indication where people are at in relation to housing. Obviously, the market's been insanely hot right now, and so on. And so if you would share a little bit about what your thoughts are on what the results of this survey might indicate people feel about housing right now.
Well, I think there's a great demand. Clearly, there's no question about that, and I think that I think it poses a challenge to our communities and leadership. There was a recent article a couple of weeks ago in the East Valley Tribune, I believe, a group of business leaders, and I would assume these are developers, residential construction interests, have retained Elliott Pollock, who did a study. And Elliott's not painting a very bright picture for what happens to the overall health of the economy here in the East Valley and the Valley in general if we don't solve this residential construction problem. We got people coming here to accept positions, and there's no place for them to live. And I think one of the tripwires in that, and there's a number of examples I could cite, is our city councils are going to start receiving pressure from a number of areas to take parcels which are designated employment sites and rezone them to residential construction. This is the trap we've fallen into before, where we deny ourselves future opportunities for economic engines, which are employment sites, in exchange for a quick fix. Let's build some apartments here. In my opinion, that's a mistake, and I think we need to take a very hard look at that. Clearly, we've been so successful, particularly, I'm proud to say, here in the city of Mesa, in attracting employers, that we now have a problem as to where to house them. So I don't have those answers, but I think we have some very good people. Whether we start here at the local level, we look to the broader picture with some GPAC and other organizations that are trying to bring these jobs here. I think we need to focus ourselves on where to house people affordably. But I think that, we've talked about several things: education, water, and workforce housing. Those are three big issues that I think need to stay in the spotlight, and we need to find a way to address. And I think I've just come up with the basis of some questions for the 2023 survey.
Steve, got thoughts on that?
Well, part of my thought on is Bob, is the survey. That's kind of what this survey will hopefully do, is begin to help be part of the process of better focusing our attention on the challenges before us. And I think it also illustrates the importance of groups like the East Valley Partnership and the Chamber and Visit Mesa, where we can get together and we can talk together about solutions to some of these challenges that we face. Rich is right, that we faced this before, and hopefully we can learn from the past and maybe even look at what other communities have done to address the housing problem. But it's not without pain. It's not without somebody stepping up to be a leader and acknowledging that we've got to change the way we do things. We can't have prices keep going up and up and up and keep people out of the housing market and expect to attract employers. So it's and then we can't expect to attract employers if we're not educating our kids and helping them be in the industries that the businesses where the demand is. And but it is our hope that having this survey go forward, getting even some of we can actually educate the survey by talking to some of the business leaders and asking the right questions. Then we get the data and we can talk about it in the coming year and adjust and address the changes that need to be addressed. So I certainly don't have the answers. I don't know that any of us have all of the answers to these questions, but at least we're talking about them and we're focusing on them, and we have leaders in place now who can use solutions that will greatly affect the future. We can find solutions to these challenges.
Cool. Would either of you like to add anything else before we close?
Only to express my gratitude to the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, Visit Mesa, and Phoenix East Valley Partnership for their participation in this. We're able to reach so many more people. We're that much stronger, and hopefully the data is that much more meaningful. So just our thanks to you, Bob, at the Chamber, Steve West, to be able to work with such a well-rooted and prestigious firm as Udall Shumway on a project like this is really an honor, and I thank you for that, Steve.
Thank you, Rich, and back at you. We're very grateful to you for helping to support this survey. And Bob, thank you for the opportunity to get the word out, get the information out. We would love to have many more participants in the coming years, and we genuinely hope that this can help the discussion and inform the debate, and that we can all become more knowledgeable about the challenges that we face, and then intelligently address them as leaders in the community and in our businesses. I think the final thing to say is there really is strength in numbers, and there is strength in unity. There is, while we are all in competition, there are some things that we need to do we need to unify together to address the common problems. And I think this survey helps us move in that direction.
Well, thank you both, Rich Adams, CEO, Southwest Business Credit Services, and Steve West, Managing Partner at Udall Shumway, for joining me today to talk about the 2022 Valley Economic Outlook Survey that was just completed and released here at the beginning of the year. One more time, Rich, if you want to let people know how they can get a copy of the survey.
Yes, if they'd like a hard copy, I have a limited number. I'll distribute on a first-come, first-served basis, or an electronic version is available. Email me at rich@swbcs.com.
Otherwise, thank you both for joining us today. I appreciate your time. I know that there's a lot of heady subjects involved in a survey like this, and a lot of forward looking that a lot of times they would say, don't forward look because you end up looking the wrong way. But thank you both for taking the time to speak with us today. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Stay connected to Mesa Chamber social media, email newsletters, Monday morning message, and mesachamber.org to always know what's happening at your Mesa Chamber.